Hello again on this Memorial Day out in Larchmont. We are sheltered from the rain, but it's still beautiful out. This is a team effort. You know, we cooked together and we made penne alla vodka, which is interesting to begin with, and we figured this wine would go well with it. So let's see what the verdict is. This is a Sodi di San Niccolo from Castellare di Castellini in Tuscany. This is one of these super Tuscans or sort of Tuscan wines that doesn't fit in any particular appellation, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This family is owned by the Penne family of watch fame. Like Ferragamo, like some of the others, I think they've sort of branched into the wine business as part of the luxury efforts. This is back in the 70s. They put a few properties together, and they make your typical Tuscan, Chianti and Reserva, and this is their top wine. And they make a really nice Merlot. If you've come across it, it's called Poggio ai Merli, Merli, the merle, the bird in French. Anyway, so here we are. This is a 2006 that I bought not too long ago. I'm trying to get into older vintages of some of these, really top crus, if you want, and to see how they age. It's made primarily of Sangiovese, or 80% and above, and some Malvasia Nero. Now, the interesting bit about these names and these nomenclatures, if you want, in Tuscany, at one point in time, without going into too many details, there were so many rules that the people who were making the biggest wines just didn't want to be bound by the rules in terms of the blends and the aging and where exactly it has to be from. And they decided to drop any pretense to have an appellation and call that wine basically table wine or IGT, independent, like what you have it here, which is Indicazione Geografica Tipica from Tuscany. And we know what these wines are. It's Fontodi, it's Tignanello, it's Le Pergole Torte by Montevertini. It's these guys, and it's many others. And so that quality has outstripped whatever the AVA rules were, and they're very happy to stay with that. That gives them an even sort of higher level of recognition. Anyway, this is the background. Let's dig in the wine. So we're gonna just look at this color first. If you look at this, just incredibly deep, not evolved at all. You don't see any orange, right? It looks like a really nice,
it's like chocolate.
Bordeaux, kind of dark chocolate. That's interesting because that thickness, it's got that thickness to it. It's not very clear. Gives you that sort of molten chocolate feel. You talk about the nose because you had a lot to say earlier about it.
Well, when I first smelled it, I told you the bouquet was striking in a great way. It feels very full and rounded and sweet without, being overpowering. I think there's a degree of the sweetness, like the fruit sweetness.
I think it's the cherries. Sangiovese is really typically cherry. And you get that really ripe cherries, not tart cherries on this. And you do get a little bit of acidity even on the nose, which is really, these are not very alcoholic wines. It's 13%. So, and back then, that's kind of what's, 2006 was a great year, by the way, in Tuscany. And so the bouquet is striking. It's really primarily on the fruit, still for a 20-year-old wine. A little bit of acidity, a little bit of that fullness, and the typical sort of cherry Sangiovese. And again, it's really there. It's not something you have to coax out of it.
It's there, but it doesn't feel overpowering.
No.
I think it's gone. It doesn't sort of linger necessarily.
You want to go back for another whiff.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's so full when you smell it.
Yeah.
What made 2006 such a good year in Tuscany?
Often when the weather conditions come together without too much effort in terms of the seasons and things turn out pretty well. And there's been a lot of good years this century, let's say.
Because it's warmer?
Not necessarily. I think there's been and people are getting better at managing the off events, whether it's hail or cold or whatever. They adjust a little bit their harvesting. They adjust their protection of the vines. And so overall, we've had all over the world. I would say we've had some really overall the majority of the vintages over the last 20 years were pretty good. Now this is a whole other topic, and which is an interesting question. Maybe we should get into it at some point. But you keep accusing these videos of being too long. Anyway, so what about in the mouth, on the palate?
I think the sweetness from the bouquet carries through, but there's an acidity. But the
Very nice
is-
acidity.
but it's not a sharp, sort of overpowering flavor.
Sort of,
It's
it's balanced by the sugars,
grounded.
and it's the tannins are very very fine. You're barely perceptible. It's a nice finish on the back of the tongue. Does it stay and does it linger on?
Well, it stays in the front of the mouth.
Actually,
A
you're
little
right.
bit.
It's in the front, on the front of the tongue.
Yeah.
I'm corrected. Yes. And how did it go with the dish?
It was great. It was a nice balance to the sweetness of the vodka sauce.
The tomato sauce.
And the
Yeah.
vodka, and there was also a little bit of smokiness in the pasta,
Yeah.
and both of those were balanced, I think, well by the acidity, which kind of cut through that sweetness.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there was vodka, and I was worried that the spirit would clash with the wine, but that kind of evaporates. It's really sublimated, let's say, and then what stays is really just a very fine, taste.
Like
And
a
the
sweetness.
Tuscan wines, I mean, at the end of the day, these Italian wines do a good job cutting through the tomato sauce. And
Crazy.
maybe it's a cliche, but maybe you can't go wrong doing that. Anyway, cheers. Thanks for sharing this with us, and see you soon.